welcome back to the round one edition of As It Happens. It was quite an exciting round, and we're going to go through the games and we're going to talk about what happened in round one of the 2026 AFL season. So, Carlton and Richmond played on Thursday night in a game that early on looked like Carlton was going to run away with it. They looked very aggressive from the first quarter. They kicked 6 goals and really looked like they learned from their mistakes against the Swans. And Richmond really struggled early to move the footy. They couldn't generate much movement. And it just looked like Carlton was absolutely going to dominate. And then something switched after half time for the Tigers. Off the back of young debutant Sam Grill, he really kick-started the ball movement for the Tigers and they really got going in the second half. Carlton couldn't really score. They were pressing hard, but they couldn't run out the game. And it leaves a lot of question marks for the Blues. As you can see here, we're looking at the scoring chart. It was all Carlton early on, and it really seemed like, having 18 scoring shots in a half of footy, you think that's enough for a team to kick a good enough score to build a lead that they could defend it the second half. But for Richmond, kicking they kicked 17 behinds. Tom Lynch 2 goals 7. They really could have won this game, the Tigers. They had a lot of opportunities late, and they just couldn't get the goals that they needed to steal this one from the Blues. And for Carlton fans, you leave the game scratching your head because you take the 4 points, but this effort, once again, same thing with the game against Sydney, second half fade outs. What are Carlton going to have to do to prevent that going forward? I think their game plan is very contested heavy, and I just don't think they have the run and spread and the fitness to play the game style that Michael Voss wants them to play. And for Carlton, Jagger Smith was their best player. Um, had, I think, about 32 touches and just was everywhere. His run and spread was phenomenal, very similar to a Nick Dacos from Collingwood. The way he's able to go from contest to contest, run into space, create those short little 15-meter passes, I think he was just phenomenal. And for the Tigers, they had a lot of contributors. Sam Lawler spent time in the midfield, went head to head with Patrick Cripps, and then was able to go forward and kick a few goals. So it was a really entertaining game, and it's very exciting if you're a Richmond fan because their young guys look phenomenal. So we're going to go to the next game, which was Friday night, and it was all Hawthorn, you know, 145 points. It was a domination. Essendon showed some sparks early on. Darcy Parish had a good first half. Had a very injury-riddled sort of past 2 years, so to get him on the park and kind of see what that midfield looks like with a full-strength team, it kind of looked all right. Zach Merritt up against the team he tried to get a trade to was phenomenal on the outside. He accumulated a lot of disposals, but was very damaging by foot. Um, Kind of felt like a one-man show at some points during the game, and eventually the Hawks just kept pressing and pressing, and Essendon's inexperienced defense just couldn't keep up. They had 3 debutants, Dyson Sharp being one of them, played not much game time, but when he was on field, he kicked 2 goals, had 6 disposals and a few tackles. So for Brad Scott, do you persist with these young kids and give them more game time, or is there more experienced players on the list that haven't had a game yet that they're looking to bring back in? I know Jordan Ridley was sorely missed down back, and he surely will come back into the team soon. For Hawthorn, it was just an exquisite display of ball movement, generating scores from half back. Sicily, Impey, Amon, like all these guys just penetrating kicks off half back, which brings the half forwards into the game. So like your Dylan Moores, your McDonald's, your Ginevans, your Nick Watson, they just looked really good. And Gunston continues his great form from last year, kicking 5. He's going to be up there for the Coleman this year. Nick Watson kicked 4. Josh Weddle showed that he can play anywhere on the ground, kicking 2 goals. So it was a really good display from Hawthorn and really worrying if you're an Essendon fan. Um, we've got the Bulldogs and GWS, and this was an absolute thrashing. The Bulldogs from start to finish completely dominated the Giants. Bontempelli with one of the best games I've seen from him. 30, 32 disposals, 3 goals. He was everywhere. He's the best player in the competition for a reason. And this might be the year that he really stakes his claim for a Brownlow medal. The Dogs look completely different from years prior. They actually defend the ball. Their new recruits are looking really good. Bruderick continues to impress. Lockie Jakes, I think that's how you say his name. Young fella, he looked really comfortable off halfback, really built himself into the game and accumulated a lot of disposals in the second half. And for the Giants, it's just going to be a case of like, how are they going to push forward with the injuries that they have? It's tough when their midfield has taken such a big hit. Like they've really tried, um, but stuff like this is going to happen. Finn Callahan was probably best on 27 disposals and 2 goals for Finn. And for the Giants, it's back to the drawing board. It's a terrible loss, and I'm sure they'll bounce back. But for the Doggies, they're looking really dangerous this year. My mob, the Cats, against Fremantle. This game was heavily one-sided for majority of it. Fremantle looked phenomenal out the gates. The Cats just couldn't generate the ball out of half-back. Constant turnovers, hospital hand passes. The Dockers were all over us. And I think the lead got out to about 40-something in the second quarter. The Dockers piled on, I think, about 8 goals in the first quarter, and it just looked like it was going to be a clinic. You got Josh Tracy and Luke Jackson that was really dominant for the Dockers. Luke Jackson continuing that sort of like midfield role where he'll ruck and then will go in as a second mid. Like when Darcy was in the ruck, Jackson was still in the midfield and he was extremely influential. Having 27 disposals as a ruckman is just unheard of. And he was able to go forward and kick a really nice goal. And Brayshaw got a really hard tag from O'Shane Mullen. He's really struggled to find himself in the game in the second half, and it left a lot on the plate for Sarong to really try and lift his side. And young fella Murphy Reed continued to show how good he can be. We've seen a really nice game from Heath Chapman. And for the Cats, it was just Max Holmes and Bailey Smith's running spread after quarter time. The ball movement, the intensity, and the pressure just got really strong, and it just generated a lot of opportunities for your Jeremy Camerons. Shannon Neal played his best game, kicking 5 goals. So for the Cats, it might be a little bit of a momentum boost going into the bye. They get to kind of resettle, refocus, and really see where they stand in 2026. But for the Dockers, this one's going to be one that they let slip away, but they're still going to be a pretty scary team this year. And then we had Sydney against Brisbane, and for the most part, it was all Sydney. Uh, Brisbane had a lot of outs, couple of suspensions, no Harris Andrews for 3 weeks, McCluggage with an injury. It was just all over the shop for the Lions, and for Sydney, they just belted them from the get go. 7 goals in the first quarter. Brisbane could only manage 2 goals up until half time, and it wasn't until the second half when Sydney kind of let the foot off the gas. The Swans off the foot off the gas, and the Lions really got going. Um, Dane Zorko at age 37, really showing that age really doesn't define you. Having 30 disposals and was their only real distributor of halfback that was really trying to get the footy going. And I just think Sydney's depth chart is just insane. McCartan probably played his best game in Sydney colours. Blakey was really good. Sheldrick continues to fly under the radar as a real big improver. But obviously, the big talking point from this game will be the injury to Errol Gulden. Suffered a shoulder dislocation. We'll be finding out in the coming days whether he might need surgery and how long he'll miss. But it's looking like a lengthy stint on the sidelines, unfortunately, for Errol. Isaac Heaney pulled up late with a hamstring complaint. So it's going to be a very interesting week for the Swans. Starting the season off well and potentially losing your 2 best players for a couple of weeks isn't very good. So fingers crossed for the pair of them, and hopefully their injuries aren't too serious. And the last game on Saturday night was the Adelaide Crows and Collingwood. So this game was really scrappy for the first half. Both teams couldn't really score, and it was really sloppy type of football. And once the game kind of opened up in the third quarter, the Crows really started to kick away. Their corridor ball movement and generation of halfback was phenomenal. Wayne Miller was just outstanding. Josh Roll continuing his All Australian form from last year. Alex Neil-Bullen showing all the class that he brought across from that premiership side of Melbourne. He was great. Rory Laird being that veteran presence of halfback. Rochelle getting some more midfield minutes looked really good. But their forward line is what's going to be dangerous again this year. Riley Thilthorpe took the Pies by the scruff of the neck and was looking really dangerous down there. And Darcy Fogarty was popping up at times and presenting well. Isaac Cumming managed to snag a few goals. Luke Pedler really holding down that small forward role looked decent. Braden Cook playing more of like a wing role this year for the Crows. So they've got a real different look going into this year, and I'm interested to see what Matthew Nicks has planned for some of their players. Lockie McAndrew made his debut in the ruck, had 27 hitouts, 13 disposals, and looked really composed for a guy that hasn't had much AFL experience. So it's going to be really interesting to see if Riley O'Brien will get a game this year. If McAndrew can play like this against the league's best, like Darcy Cameron, he's going to be holding his spot for a while. So a very well done game from the Crows. Much needed win and some confidence for them to play on the MCG later in the year. And Sunday was the biggest surprise of the round. North Melbourne. North Melbourne, probably the best game they've played in a decade. Uh, Scintillating football. They were just piecing Port Adelaide apart. Their ball movement was the best I've seen in the Clarko era. They were just getting centre clearance after centre clearance. Their midfielders looked phenomenal. They trialled a few new positions. Luke Parker playing behind the footy looked great off halfback. Caleb Daniel played one of his best games for the club. His kicks off halfback was really good. Dylan Stevens played a good game, but it was the class of Harry Sheasel, your Luke Davies-Uniacke, and you had debutant Blamires, was an intern for Collingwood selling memberships, and then got a call up from the Kangas and debuted pretty quickly, and he looked great. Charlie Comden was solid down back. Tristan Cherry struggled in the first half with the new ruck rules. Had 0 hitouts in the first quarter, and it was quite worrying for anyone that plays Supercoach. You're a bit worried, but he had about 11 tackles and just looked really composed around the ground. Used his weight to really bully Vincentini and got a hold of the contest around the ground and really showed that he's more than just a centre bounce ruckman, and he's going to continue his All Australian form, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's the best ruck in the comp by the end of the season. And for Port Adelaide, it was the Zach Butters show, and he couldn't carry this team. They looked awful. Nothing really positive to say about Port Adelaide. Todd Marshall looked really good in his new role until he went down with an ankle injury. Connor Rosie was very sloppy with the football, was falling over, missing kicks, and was just really rushing, trying to play at a tempo that the rest of his team wasn't really following with. So back to the drawing board for Josh Carr, because that's a really concerning loss, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond to a really bad performance like that. The D's got the job done over the Saints. Stephen King's first game as new head coach at the Melbourne Football Club. They looked really good. Their ball movement was phenomenal. They were really moving the ball quick. Like, I've never seen a Melbourne team that really played with this much freedom. Um, Salem was good off half back. Max Gawn, for me, was best on ground. When the game needed to be won, he was there, taking marks off half back, intercepting, driving the ball forward, winning the clearances. He set up a really nice Van Royen goal, who kicked, I think, 5 or 6 goals, and looks really good. They had a lot of flair, a lot of young guys coming through. Jaff played his first game for the club. Jack Steele looked good in the midfield. Caleb Winter in his new role looked really solid, kind of like an extra mid coming up to the stoppage off the forward flank. Lindsay played good, and it's just going to be interesting to see whether these finish this year because a lot of pundits had them down the bottom. But if they can play like this most weeks, they are definitely going to be a smoky for the wild card and potentially even finals. So a really good win for Stephen King in his first game as Melbourne coach. And the last game of the round was Gold Coast and West Coast. Very comfortable win for Gold Coast. Never really looked challenged at all. Christian Petrarca continuing his Brownlow form. Kicked, I think, 2 or 3 goals in the first quarter and just looked like a man on a mission. Noah Anderson was really good. Copped a really hard bump from Harley Reid late in the game. Had to sit the rest of the game on the bench, so that's going to be a watch this week if he actually has a concussion and potentially a suspension for Harley Reid if that is the case. Ben King kicked 5 goals as he continues his mission. The Coleman medal winner Leo Lombard was solid, provided some forward pressure. Alex Davies, the 23-year-old, continuing to show why the Gold Coast Suns have so much faith in him. He tried to go to Collingwood a couple of years back, and the Suns said, "Nope, you staying with us." 25 disposals, hit the scoreboard a couple times, and really looked like a damaging midfielder. And surprisingly, uh, the Suns were just dominant. I mean, Jared Witts was flogging the ruck. I think he had 20 disposals, 50 odd hitouts. For the Eagles, it's probably going to be another year of pain. Uh, there wasn't really much positives to come out of it besides their young fellas. Milan Murdoch had 2 goals, kicked I think 20. No, kicked 2 goals, one had about 20 something disposals. Um, Tom McCarthy playing through the midfield, Josh Lindsay off half back. Dev Robertson showing a bit of appetite around the contest with 12 tackles. So it was just a really easy win for the Suns, and they were able to coast late. So um, yeah, I don't know when the Eagles are going to win their first game, but I wouldn't be counting on it being very soon. Gold Coast will probably be premiership favourites. They've got a really nice fixture coming soon, so expect a lot of results like this going forward. But that's the round, and I think I went 6 for 8 on my tips. So I'll be posting another video in a couple days' time reviewing that, and we'll be looking at round two. We've got a couple buys. I think 4 teams have buys for round two, so another short round. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think about the round or your team's performance in the comments. And I appreciate all the support you guys give my videos. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.